had a case that was filed in 2006 that was, we jointly moved to stay after the election of 2006, in which the Democratic candidates won both the offices of Secretary of State and Attorney General. And both of them publicly said, we'd like to settle cases of merit that had been filed against our predecessors. And so we entered into a settlement discussion, and we entered into a standstill agreement, and then followed by a joint motion to stay the case pending the consummation of a settlement. So as time passed, one piece of the settlement concept was that the Attorney General's office would conduct a criminal investigation of the misconduct, the irregularities and misconduct in the 2004 election. And it became clear that they did not feel equipped to proceed with that without a further development of facts. At that point, we asked the Attorney General to join us in a reopening of our case to permit us to do civil discovery, to put the thing in a better posture so that the Attorney General's office could feel comfortable proceeding and following through with the original settlement concept. And that's what we're in the process of doing. We got the agreement of the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to lift the stay, we had filed to lift the stay. They had initially opposed it because they said we need to focus exclusively on the 2008 election. And we said, we submitted 2 affidavits and argument that the same people who stole 2000, 2004 are still in business and are actively engaged in a plan to steal 2008. So they agreed to execute a joint, a consent to a consent order that would lifted the stay for the purpose of conducting one of the key depositions, which is of Michael Connell, who is the chief information technology person for both Bush campaigns, 2000, 2004, and now the McCain campaign, as well as many other roles, including a role with the state government, the Secretary of State's office in Ohio in 2004, where he designed the website that was hosting the counting of the ballots and the publication of the ballot count. Michael Connell is a key witness because we believe that there's an ongoing conspiracy which rises to the level of a corrupt, what's talked about in the Ohio Corrupt Practices Act, which is a series of fraudulent actions. It goes back to 2000, after the New Hampshire primary, where Rove basically says we've got to do some extraordinary things, one of which is to team up with some of these corrupt business organizations, such as the tobacco industry, to get their resources to commit to support Bush as the candidate with, the reformer with results is the term they used. Meaning, look what he did to the Texas Supreme Court, look what he did to tort liability for major corporations in Texas. He'll do the same thing for the nation if you elect him. And this is a pitch to the business people who want to make as much money as possible without regulation, without meaningful tort liability when they commit terrible harm to the public interest. So Michael Connell is someone that we are not saying that he is a principal conspirator, but rather he has been an instrument in nearly every aspect of the activity that Rove put together in this conspiracy that we believe started in 2000 and continues to this day. The case now is in a position where the stay has been lifted for the purpose of this very targeted discovery activity, starting with Connell and then proceeding to others as agreed between the Attorney Generals and ourselves, the Secretary of State and ourselves. We have issued a subpoena for Michael Connell, served the subpoena, and Michael Connell has engaged a law firm and a number of lawyers, and they're seeking to delay and avoid the deposition and the production of very simple documents that we asked for, and arguing trade secret and confidentiality and undue burden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that we anticipate is going to be intensely litigated over the next few weeks. When you commit a major law firm to devise every strategy that can be utilized to delay and avoid, that there are many avenues that can be pursued. On the other side, you know, we can stress the importance, and I'll just focus on one thing. And this has not been reported in the mainstream press, but it's been out there in the blogosphere for over a year. That Ken Blackwell contracted to have a partisan Republican service host the counting of the votes in Ohio in 2004. And what we've asked for is the architecture map, or the schematic, the systematic explanation of what was the connection between the Secretary of State's computer and this smart tech computer in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You know, how did they communicate with each other? How was it controlled in terms of one functioning as a backup to the other versus the other being the primary computer that was counting the votes, tabulating the votes? And how did they relate to the input coming from the counties as they tabulated the votes in the counties? And this is something that, as Connell says in his affidavit, this is something that should be public record. Well, as one of the news organizations asked for this material from the Secretary of State, they're saying, well, we don't have that. So what Ken Blackwell did as a partisan is set up this partisan participation in the counting of Ohio's votes, this computer system counting the votes. And then when he left the office, apparently he took this schematic with him. And so we will be seeking that. And you say, you know, isn't this rather important to know? And when we filed our lawsuit against the Bush election in 2004, we alleged that there was such an operation that not only enabled the Republican National Committee and the Bush campaign to be possibly having access and manipulation of the Ohio vote count in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but even in the White House, because what's to prevent, once you've got it into a partisan mode, what's to prevent them from having a connection in Washington, and Carl Rove sitting in the White House with his computer actually doing the final manipulation and final decision how many votes we're going to switch from Kerry to Bush. We know, and we knew this back in 2004, there were some 60,000 votes switched from Kerry to Bush in 12 or more counties in southwestern Ohio. These are Republican counties. So these are counties where you'd say, well, what kind of a Democratic Party do you have when you have no patronage because you can't elect anyone, because the population the demographics are overwhelmingly Republican. In these counties, in these 12 counties, John Kerry got fewer votes than other significant parts of the Democratic ticket. And the traditional pattern is that the top of the ticket leads the ticket. People are more concerned about the presidency. The presidency typically is more competitive. And in these counties, by far, it was the only competitive race. The other races were walkaways. And yet, these walkaways, the losing Democratic candidate is getting more votes than John Kerry, who was, in fact, the winning candidate. Well, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in this bank building, and this is portrayed in one of the more recent movies, Free for All, they have the servers for the Bush campaign, Bush-Cheney 2004. They had the Republican National Committee servers and many other servers for partisan organizations, partisan campaigns, Republican campaigns. So just if you say, well, that doesn't prove that these people, just because it's in the same building and in the same computer systems, in the same company called Smart Tech that's administering this, that doesn't prove it. Well, but it sure suggests that Ken Blackwell, as a very partisan Secretary of State, is using the power of his office to send the data to a partisan entity. Smart Tech is the president of Smart Tech is a person named Jeff Averbeck. And Jeff Averbeck has two businesses. One is the Smart Tech, which is this web serving entity, and then the other is some kind of an evangelical publishing house. He is a partisan person. He is connected to the evangelical, the right-wing religious community, and he's partisan. A particular kind of partisan. He's you would say, with this evangelical connection, he's connected to this right-wing segment, some of which, and perhaps he is included in this mix, out of a fanatic, and when I say fanatic, I mean fanatic to the point where you would subordinate other values to pursue this value, right to life, or ending abortion rights or choice rights, upsetting Roe versus Wade, that becomes so important that you're willing to say, well, let's suppress those people from voting because they'll vote Democratic, and a Democratic president will appoint a Supreme Court justice who will accept that precedent. We need someone who will appoint someone who will vote to overturn that precedent. And suppressing votes is okay, switching votes is okay, because of this higher value that we place on this religious understanding. The common procedure would be to do it within the state. The common procedure would be, to the extent that you need a commercial backup, it would be to use one of the major commercial backup services, and they exist within the state. And the idea of using something that is a smaller organization that basically exists solely to serve Republican operations, to put a governmental function, counting the votes on a partisan, with a partisan organization, everything else there is partisan. It certainly looks bad.
Well, I think technically in cyber talk, this is called the man in the middle. And so what you're saying is that all the precincts reporting was coming in, and instead of going to a central repository and then being publicized, it was going to out of state, maybe even into the White House basement, and then being reported after it had been tweaked. I mean, what I'd like you to do is to lay out the way this system, the way you suspect the system works.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm just a lawyer. I'm not an expert in this computer technology, and we have an expert in computer technology. We have one of the top experts in the world. This gentleman's name is Stephen Spoonamore. He is a cybersecurity expert, recognized as such by the media. When NPR has a program on the hacking of Pentagon computers and the vulnerability to hacking, who do they call on? 3 national experts, one of whom is Stephen Spoonermore. When they had a program on the problem of computer hacking in business data of people doing business with China, they had 3 experts. One was from Congress, one was formerly of the White House, and Stephen Spoonermore. In terms of business relationships, when MasterCard or Visa or one of these credit card companies is trying to secure their systems from fraud, which goes on an ongoing basis, Stephen Spoonermore is hit. One of his companies comes into the picture. His primary business is preventing fraud against banks and credit card companies. But he also consults with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with the Pentagon, and with the Secret Service. There are functions within the government where it's important to destroy data permanently. For example, there's technology used to make money. And when they print the money, as I understand it, they want to, once they've completed the printing, they want to destroy the data that's associated with this. He's an expert in data destruction, for legitimate purposes. So this is a guy who has incredible expertise. When we were holding a news conference, and I mentioned that I was asked, what did Carl Rove do wrong? We're designating Carl Rove as the principal perpetrator of this racketeering conspiracy. I said that Carl Rove planted. First of all, he courted an FBI agent. He got him to tune in to the White House sensitivities by constantly communicating with him, and then moved that agent into the Cincinnati office of the FBI December 2004. That's the agent who closed down the investigation by the FBI of the obvious indications of fraud in the 2004 election. I made this assertion based upon my own research. At that point, Stephen Spoonermore said, well, I don't know about what Cliff just said, but I was working with the head of cybersecurity with the FBI, who told me that he did not have no one asked him to check any computers or analyze the reports of changing out hard drives and the recount and so on in Ohio. And on that basis, knowing that the cybersecurity experts in the FBI were not engaged, then in my opinion, as a cybersecurity expert, it means the FBI did not do a meaningful investigation. It was just superficial. That's the quality of this man's expertise. He indicates that even if it's for a limited period of time, to have this Chattanooga computer as the man in the middle, they could accomplish a great deal of mischief with the vote count, and it's not acceptable. It's not a proper procedure. It's suggestive of a fraudulent mechanism.
And he's gone on record saying that, has he?
Stephen Spoonermore is on record saying that this is a highly questionable situation, and that all of this should have been investigated by the authorities, the FBI, and it wasn't, and that we are in a position of terrible vulnerability. The beauty of Stephen Spoonermore as an expert witness is that he's not just someone focusing on election machines. He is in the business primarily of dealing with the machines and the technology, the communication systems that surround our credit card and banking business. So it's a tremendous amount of business. And there is a consistent pattern of some 2.5% of this volume that is subjected to fraud. And his job, his profession, is to keep on top of this and to chase the crooks who would drive that to a higher amount of money. Now, so now he looks at the voting machines, the voting technology, the communication systems associated with that technology, and he says, wait a minute, the protocols that I see in the banking side and the credit card side don't exist in the election side. And their vulnerability is tremendous. The people who are involved in terms of their level of expertise and training is different, it's less. The security in the machines, the software, all the protections that you see in the money side are not on the voting side. And so on that basis, he looks for indications of fraud. He applies the same kind of thinking that he applies to the credit card business, the banking business. He says, now what patterns would indicate fraudulent activity over here on the voting side? And he's seen these patterns. Independently of anything we were doing in Ohio, he saw this pattern in southwestern Ohio of this extraordinary loss of votes by John Kerry. And he said, that's fraud. That's a pattern of fraud. And he independently reported it to his friends in the FBI and was pleased to see that they had an investigation. Follows up later and is shocked to learn that it had been closed down. We have a fraudulent system of elections in the United States. He is in a position to say that with a great deal of authority, based upon a great deal of experience and knowledge, and that's why we are very, very pleased to have him as our expert witness. Is anyone who questions this fraudulent activity at risk? And the answer is yes. Whether it's an expert witness, whether it's a politician who speaks out. And I think that's one of the reasons, understanding that, is one of the reasons that the Kennedy family, as trustees for the giving of the Profiles in Courage, the John Kennedy Profiles in Courage Award, gave that award to Jennifer Brunner, who, as Secretary of State, set up a study of scientists and experts from the industry in a very open way to study the vulnerability of the machines used, the electronic machines used in Ohio to count the votes, and found that it was simple as making a pie, simplicity of techniques to change the votes on these machines, and therefore sought support from the legislature to appropriate the funds necessary to replace the electronic voting machines with machines that would use paper ballots, and did not get that support. But for her effort to establish this clearly for everyone to understand, she was given the Profiles in Courage Award.
Well, I think you ought to get it.
Well, I think Bobby Kennedy ought to get it. Bobby Kennedy wrote in my opinion, the definitive explanation of what happened in Ohio in 2004. He drew upon all kinds of sources, including work that Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman did, and we did in our lawsuit, and the people at Rolling Stone magazine were doing their own research. They put together the story not just in words, but also graphic illustration that would help the ordinary average reader, would help them understand. And included in Bobby Kennedy's work is this a statement by him that initially, when he saw this, heard about this, he was skeptical. So he went to someone whose judgment he trusted, Lou Harris, who had been the pollster for his uncle, John F. Kennedy, and for his father, Bobby Kennedy. And while Lou Harris was retired, he still knew that business. I mean, he's one of the founders of the polling business. And Lou Harris said that it was obvious that this was the dirtiest election in American history. It was obviously stolen. And all you had to do is look at the precinct data and compare it to prior elections, and you could see that it was a stolen election. So it's a powerful article. and has not been given the wide circulation it really should have.
Okay, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think you want to say?
Well, what I want to say is that those who have covered this theft up, covered this conspiracy up, starting with Carl Rove, how did they do it? Particularly with respect to the Ohio election, where this was a theft not only of Ohio but other states and the national popular vote. This was a massive vote switching operation, vote suppression and vote switching, because they didn't want to make the mistake of Florida. In Florida, if you recall, it was very close. And Al Gore, the reported vote showed Al Gore winning the popular vote nationally. Well, each time they say, well, we don't want that again. So in 2004, they stole the vote nationally. You know, the exit polls, which is the international gold standard of detecting fraud in elections, showed they cheated on the national popular vote, they cheated in the multiple states for the electoral college vote. Carl Rove is a propagandist as well as a thief, and they used the Iraq War as a cover. This is the biggest example of wag the dog in history, where you're using war to manipulate domestic opinion, as a cover for theft and fraud, to say we can't investigate the president, we can't call his integrity into question when we're about to go into Fallujah, our troops are going into Fallujah, or we're about to have a major election in Iraq that will establish a new constitution and establish a democratic institution in Iraq. Rove is a criminal, using criminal methods to cover up, to commit crime and to cover up the crime and to get away with it. And even to this day, as we identify a witness that can really shed light on the entire conspiracy, we have been informed by somebody in the McCain campaign who's an honest person that Rove has made a threat against that witness. He's intimidating witnesses. He is so out of control that he, even to this day, even though he's no longer Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, he's claiming to have the power to decide who gets prosecuted and who gets pardoned by President Bush. I mean, this is very something of great concern, and you would think that this is something that our media and all of us should be focusing on. How could we let someone with this criminal pattern of conduct from his college days, where he's rigging a college election for college Republican president or whatever it was, head of college Republicans, cheating in that election, cheating in every election he's ever been involved with. How can this go on in this country, which is supposed to have a free press? We're supposed to be critically minded. It's absurd. My understanding is that an inside tipster is saying that there is a plan in place to rig the 2008 election, and identifying some of the people involved, where some of the activities going on, and I'm personally not aware that specific states have been identified.
But the tipster tipped who?
A guy named Brett Kimberlin. And Brett is someone who has been interested in this subject since 2004, and one of his investigative techniques has been to offer a reward for people with knowledge of this criminal activity to come forward. And as a result of offering a reward and being out there soliciting this, he gets people coming to him and giving him information.
And so this is a credible tip?
Well, when the tip came in initially, we asked for advice from Stephen Spoonamore, and he did some checking, and based on his best judgment, he felt that it was a credible tip. he satisfied himself that it was a credible tip. Once he said that, I reported it to the authorities, and which means I believe it was credible. I view Stephen Spoonamore as the equivalent of a top person in the FBI in the area of cybersecurity, and experience in chasing down this sort of activity. So I reported it to the court, I reported it to the Attorney General of the United States, I reported it to the Attorney General of Ohio, and we continue, as we get information, we continue to make those reports.
And has the response been from all those agencies?
Well, there are elements within the federal government that are cracking down on the Rove's politicization of the Justice Department. There's the Inspector General in the Justice Department and a group that reviews professional responsibility issues, and I believe they were issuing a report today that indicates, further indicates the problems that they had when Rove has sent people into the Justice Department to corrupt its operation. There are people there who are part of the traditional Justice Department, civil service, career prosecutors. One of whom I know personally because I happened to work closely with his operation in Cleveland when he was head of the Cleveland Strike Force. He's there to this day, and I'm now sending information directly to him. I have confidence in his integrity and his competence, and feel that it was important to have removed Gonzalez from that job. I'm not sure entirely about Mukasey, but I am sure about a career prosecutor in the Justice Department. We have not heard from him. It's sort of a one-way communication. But with respect to the Ohio Attorney General and the Secretary of State, the fact that they agreed to lift the stay to permit us to proceed is an indication of their commitment to assure that the rule of law is preserved and law enforcement is able to address this kind of issue.
So what's the timetable for all of this? Is it likely to, as they say, be ripe or be adjudicated in any meaningful way before the election?
Well, what we're trying to do is our best to pursue the same strategy we did after the 2004 election, which was not just to file something in court, but to also brief the investigative press corps and to involve the appropriate members of Congress. In the aftermath of the 2004 election, John Conyers performed heroically. He had a tremendous tremendous commitment of staff time, hearing time, and they compiled what Mark Crispin Miller described as the most significant report ever done by Congress. It's some 100-page report that was the basis for the challenge to the Ohio electoral vote in the aftermath of the 2004 election. So we are working with Congress to try to support them in bringing some of these witnesses into a congressional hearing. We are trying to press forward with our litigation activity, and we are trying to make sure that the investigative press corps has this information, which we accomplish by having press conferences and an ongoing communication with investigative reporters. So we're doing our best. Carl Rove is doing his best. He's got people like supporters like the Columbus Dispatch editorial board, which continues to call us conspiracy theorists, conspiracy mongers. They had the audacity to call the Kennedy family conspiracy mongers for having given this Profiles in Courage Award to Jennifer Brunner. This is incredible. So there are people out there who want to, basically say, don't worry, electronic voting is fine, we'll take care of it. Don't listen to these people. And they're part of they're perhaps, hopefully, unknowing tools of a criminal conspiracy. we're in the midst of a presidential campaign, and to me, the context in which we're dealing is like 2006 in Ohio, where the reputation of the Republican Party was so tarnished, and the quality of the candidates on the Democratic side was so good, and their reputation, by comparison, was so good, clean, that it was a landslide. And the strategy of the Democratic Party in this election is to basically accomplish at the federal level or the national level what was done in Ohio in 2006, which is to create a landslide. How do you create a landslide? By being positive, by having a strong candidate, by having good policies, good policy options, by making people comfortable. And so the overall strategy of the Obama campaign and the Democratic National Committee, as I understand it, is not to focus on what we've been talking about, but rather to focus on all the things that bring confidence in the American people, that they can vote, their votes will be honored and counted, and their votes will effect the change that is so much needed. So I'm not one of those who disagrees with that strategy for them, but as a nonpartisan person, as a lawyer, committed to the rule of law and the preservation of the integrity of the elections, we have to fight against the fraud, and we have to be pointing out that there are these criminals, that there's this criminal conspiracy that's attempting to undermine the election. They were out there in 2006 and they were overwhelmed. My personal belief is they will be overwhelmed once again. They are on the run. They are falling apart. It's a criminal conspiracy that's being exposed and will fall apart. And so my only point is that people should not be discouraged, and people should be confident that our election system, as flawed as it is, if people vote reflecting a strong consensus, if they vote in enough numbers, it will prevail, and it will be rather than a piece of litigation or a piece of investigative reporting, it will be the thing that turns the tide and puts this to rest and restores honest elections in the United States.